If you're going for a more organic hand-drawn look, but still want the benefits of vector-based artwork, you'll want to learn about the freehand tool. This is a tool that lets you use a tablet or drawing screen to draw more natural pen strokes with pressure sensitivity. But if you turn on viewing vector strokes, you see these lines are still vector-based and can be modified by control points just like other vector art. By the way, to really see what your strokes are going to look like, you might want to turn on anti-aliasing in your display quality settings. If your computer can handle it, you can leave this on, but if the brush gets sluggish, just turn that off and it will perform better. To make this tool easy to use, you're going to want to understand all its settings and features. First, as always, check under the toolbar here to see how modifier keys affect the tool. In this case, if we hold Alt and drag left or right, that lets us adjust the size of the brush on the fly. That's much easier than changing the width over here in the style palette. And also, if you hold Command or Control on Windows and click, you can delete a segment between 2 points. Next, let's look at the options on the drop-down menu here. First, you can choose whether you want pressure sensitivity on or not. You can set the line variation to none, in which case the line will be a uniform thickness like using the other vector tools. Or you can also set it to random, which will add random variation to your line width just to make it look a little more organic. Or you can have pressure sensitivity on, so the thickness is controlled by how hard you press with your tablet stylus. The width variation setting controls the range of difference that's allowed. So the maximum thickness with maximum pen pressure is whatever the width setting is set to. And the smallest you can go with lightest pressure is controlled by this width variation. 100 would let you get very small with light pressure, but 0 would basically be the same as no variation. Taper start and taper end are only really relevant if you aren't drawing with a tablet or screen with pen pressure. If you draw freehand with a mouse, this will automatically add taper to the start and end of a stroke. I am using a drawing screen, so my pen pressure is going to override this anyway. Next comes smoothing and point reduction. What you set this at is going to be very personal to you. These both control how much Moho adjusts the lines you draw to make them smoother. Smoothing is how much Moho smooths the line as you draw to account for pen wobble. If I turn this way up, you can see how much it's changing things as I go. I like to keep that fairly low. Then point reduction is how much Moho will try to simplify your lines after you've finished drawing them. This is basically like running the simplify command with the selection tool, but automatic. So if I turn that all the way down and draw a stroke, you can see how many points it's made of. But if I turn that up, even to just 20, and draw a similar stroke, you can see there's fewer points. By the way, remember you may need to do a Command or Control R to do a render to judge the real smoothness of your lines and decide if extra points makes your lines look better or worse. So I'd recommend you have at least a little of smooth and point reduction turned on. Next, let's take a look at the settings out here on the toolbar. First of all, notice we have autofill and autostroke like with the other vector tools. Autostroke is what actually draws the strokes we've been looking at. Otherwise, it just makes a raw vector path. And autofill will fill the shape you draw with the fill color if you draw a closed shape. Whether your shape gets treated as open or closed is dependent on some of these other settings. There are two different weld settings here to be aware of: auto weld and weld ends. First, let's look at auto weld. If I draw a stroke and then go to draw another one that intersects with it, you can see my cursor snaps to the line I'm going to intersect with and makes a control point connecting them. Same happens if I draw all the way through. They get welded at the intersection. If auto weld is off, intersecting lines remain separate. Weld ends is like auto weld, but it only applies to endpoints of strokes. So now if I draw two lines, notice my cursor doesn't snap to the middle of the first stroke, but it will to the end point. Using this, you can build up a bigger shape with many strokes that get combined into one. And if you close the shape, it will get filled in if autofill is on. You can also make closed shapes with a single stroke if the ends get welded. Another way to make a closed shape is to check the Auto Close option. Then it will automatically draw a closing line between your endpoints whether they're welded or not. Check Hide Auto Close segment, and that final closing line won't have the stroke applied to it. Now you'll also notice when Auto Weld is on that you have these other options, Trim Start and Trim End. These are intended to help make your line work easier and cleaner when you have lines intersecting. So let's say I have a shape and I want to add some interior lines that intersect with the outline. Let's turn on Trim Start. And now the part of my line before the intersection gets trimmed away. With Trim End, the opposite happens. The part after the intersection gets trimmed. And if both are enabled and I cross another line, it will trim away whichever is shorter. Also, I can draw all the way through my shape and both the start and end bit get trimmed, just leaving the portion between the two intersection points. That's a lot easier than trying to start and end your line exactly on the outline. The last setting on the toolbar is the Merge Strokes option. With this enabled, all the strokes you make will be treated as parts of the same shape. So if you select with the Select Shape tool, it highlights all the strokes and you can change their color or style setting at the same time. If you disable Merge Strokes, the strokes you draw will be their own shapes. If you re-enable Merge Strokes, it will start grouping them again, starting with the previous stroke you drew. So before we finish looking at the freehand tool, I wanted to take a quick look at the Styles palette, specifically the different brush settings. Just double click here where it currently says No Brush, and you can choose from one of the preset options here. Some of these are meant to make your strokes look more like natural media, and others are used to make patterns that follow your strokes. If you're interested in learning more about these brushes, we're going to cover that and the other features of the Style palette in the next video. I'll see you there.